The first time I heard it, I thought it was feedback, not a voice, not anything clear, just a sound that didn't belong in the system. I work at a desalination plant along the Gulf Coast. Night shift mostly, less traffic, fewer interruptions, easier to monitor pressure and flow without constant adjustments from the day crew. It's not a complicated job. You watch numbers, you listen for changes. Most of the time, if something's wrong, you hear it before you see it. A change in pitch, a vibration that doesn't match the load. The system talks to you, in a way, just not like that. That night, everything was running steady. Intake pumps normal, pressure consistent, no alarms. I was doing a routine walk through the intake corridor, the section where the seawater comes in before treatment. It's louder there, low, constant movement, water forced through steel at a rate you don't really think about unless something changes. I stopped near one of the larger pipes, not because anything looked wrong, because the sound shifted, just slightly, like a fluctuation. I leaned closer. At first, it blended in, the usual turbulence, the hum of the pump. Then it separated, not into words, just rhythm, uneven, almost like breathing. I stayed there longer than I should have, because once you notice something like that, you want to confirm it. I told myself it was cavitation, air pockets collapsing in the flow. That can sound strange if you're close enough. I moved on, didn't log it, didn't think about it again. Until the next night. Same shift, same route. I slowed down before I reached that section. Didn't mean to, just anticipated it. The sound was there before I got close. Faint, different. I stood beside the pipe again, listened. This time, it wasn't just rhythm. There were breaks in it. Short, structured, like something was starting and stopping over and over. I frowned, because that didn't match anything mechanical. I pressed my hand lightly against the metal. Cold, steady vibration. But underneath that, something else, irregular, not tied to the system. I leaned in closer, and that's when I thought I heard it. Not clearly, just enough to question it. A sound that almost formed a word. I pulled back immediately, stood there for a second, waited. Nothing, just the normal flow again. I told myself I imagined it. That's what you do with things like that. You don't escalate it unless it repeats. It repeated. The third night, I brought a handheld recorder, not officially, just something small. I held it near the pipe, let it run, didn't stay as long, didn't listen too closely, because I didn't want to convince myself of something that wasn't there. I checked it later, alone, office lights off. Just the playback. At first, nothing, static, flow, low mechanical hum. Then, it changed. The background noise dropped slightly, not gone, just pushed back, and something else came forward, layered into it. Voices, not clear, but human, multiple, overlapping, whispering. I froze, rewound it, played it again. Same thing, not random, not distortion, structured, like conversation, just out of reach. I leaned closer to the speaker, turned the volume up slightly, and for a second, one of them separated, a single voice, closer than the others. It said something. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was wrong, like it had learned how to sound human, but didn't quite understand how to be one. I shut it off, sat there for a long time, because once you hear something like that, you don't go back to normal explanations, not completely. The next night, I didn't go near that section, took a different route, stayed in the control room longer, watched the monitors. Everything looked fine, flow rates normal, pressure stable, but I noticed something I hadn't before. The intake numbers were slightly higher than expected, not enough to trigger anything, just above baseline, consistently. I checked the logs, same pattern, gradual increase, over days. I leaned back in my chair, because that didn't make sense. Nothing had changed upstream. No reason for increased intake, unless I stopped that thought, didn't follow it. Instead, I went back down there, not because I wanted to, because I needed to confirm it. The corridor felt colder, not dramatically, just enough to notice. I walked slower this time. The sound started earlier, before I even reached the pipe, faint but distinct. I didn't stop right next to it, stayed a few feet back. Listened. The voices were clearer now, still layered, still overlapping, but closer, like they weren't just inside the pipe anymore, like they were right behind the metal, pressing against it, trying to match something. I didn't move, didn't lean in, just stood there, and one of the voices shifted, separated from the others, slower, more deliberate, and then it matched my breathing. I didn't notice it at first, not consciously, just a feeling that something was sinking. Inhale, pause, exhale. The sound followed, not perfectly, but close enough. I stepped back immediately. The rhythm broke, the voices blurred again. Back into noise. I left, didn't finish the round, didn't log anything, because I understood something then. They weren't just making sounds, they were listening, learning. The next few nights, I stayed away from that section completely, but it didn't matter, because I started hearing it elsewhere, fainter, in smaller pipes, in the walls, not voices, just attempts, fragments, pieces of sound that didn't belong to the system. I checked the intake again. The numbers had gone up, still within limits, but steadily increasing. I stood in the control room, listening to the hum of everything running normally, and realized something I hadn't before. We weren't just pulling water in, we were pulling something else with it. And whatever it wasn't just passing through, it was staying, learning the system, learning the sounds, learning us. I don't go near the intake anymore. Not alone, not at night. Because sometimes, when the plant is quiet enough, I can hear it through the walls. Not clearly, just enough. A voice, almost forming my name, stopping just short of getting it right, like it's practicing, waiting for the moment it finally sounds close enough that I won't question who it's supposed to be coming from on the other side of the pipe. I stopped using my name out loud after that. Not officially, just less. No radio checks where I said it. No signing off the way I used to. I told myself it didn't matter, that whatever I heard was just pattern recognition, the brain trying to turn noise into something familiar. That explanation held for a few days, until it changed, not louder, clearer. The difference is worse. Loud can still be dismissed. Clarity you have to deal with. I was in the secondary corridor, not the main intake. Smaller lines, lower flow, quieter. I was logging pressure on one of the auxiliary pipes when I heard it again. Not layered this time, not buried under movement. Just one voice, close. It didn't say anything at first. It just matched me. The sound of my sleeve brushing the pipe. The shift of my boots against the floor. Even the small breath I let out when I leaned down. A second later, the pipe echoed it back, not as a reflection, as an attempt. Slightly off, delayed, like it was repeating me, but hadn't quite gotten the timing right. I stood still, didn't move, didn't make a sound. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, it filled the silence. A breath, not mine. Close enough that I felt it in my chest anyway. I stepped away slowly, didn't run, didn't want to give it more to copy. The sound followed, not physically, just enough that I could tell it was still trying. I left the corridor, went straight to the control room, closed the door, sat there longer than I needed to, because I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just given it something new, not a word, something smaller, a way of being. The next night, I avoided all the quieter sections, stayed near the main systems, where the noise was constant, where nothing stood out. That helped. For a while, then I noticed something else. The plant sounded different, not wrong, just slightly more uniform. Like the irregularities, the small inconsistencies in sound were smoothing out. I checked the system logs. Everything was still within normal ranges. Nothing flagged. But the audio, if you stayed still long enough, it almost sounded coordinated, not mechanical, intentional. I started moving more, not because I had to, because I didn't want to hear it settle. That's when I realized what I had missed. It wasn't just mimicking us. It was learning the system, the pipes, the flow, the pressure, everything that made the plant work. And once it understood that, it didn't need to copy voices anymore. It could use the structure itself. A few nights later, I heard something through the wall, not from a pipe, from the space between them. A voice, clear, steady, not distorted. It said my name, perfectly. I didn't respond, didn't move, because I knew, if I did, it would have confirmation, not just of the sound, of the reaction. It said it again, same tone, same cadence, like someone calling from the other side of a door. I stood there, listening, and realized something that made it worse. It wasn't trying to sound like me, it was trying to sound like someone I'd answer. I left the room, didn't check the wall, didn't trace the source, because I knew there wouldn't be one, not in any way that made sense. I've started noticing people respond to things before they realize it, turning their heads slightly, pausing mid-step, like they almost heard something that didn't fully register. That's how it spreads, not by getting louder, by getting closer to being understood, closer to sounding right. I don't stay late anymore, don't walk the corridors alone, and I don't respond to anything that comes from inside the system, because I don't think it's trying to imitate us anymore. I think it's deciding which parts of us are worth keeping, and once it gets that right, I don't think it'll need to stay inside the pipes to sound like something we trust enough to answer back. I started noticing how people answered things, not conversations, small reactions, a head turn, a quiet, yeah, under their breath, moments that didn't lead anywhere. At first, I thought it was nothing, fatigue, routine, but it kept happening, always the same pattern. Someone pauses, like they just heard something close. Then they dismiss it, keep moving, like it didn't matter. I stopped dismissing it, because I knew what it sounded like before it became clear. Not a voice, a shape of one, something almost recognizable that your brain fills in the rest of. That's the part it learned, not words, expectation. I was in the control room when it happened again. Middle of the shift, monitors steady, everything normal. I was writing something down, and I heard it. Not my name, something else, familiar. I almost answered, not out loud, just that instinct, to acknowledge it. I stopped myself, sat there, waited. It didn't repeat, didn't get clearer, just faded back into the system noise. I didn't move for a while, because I realized how close that was. I didn't need it to sound perfect. I already knew what it was supposed to be. That's all it needed. The next night, someone answered, not fully, just a quiet, yeah, from down the corridor. I froze, didn't move, didn't call out. A few seconds passed, then footsteps, normal, nothing followed. They came into the control room a minute later, didn't mention it, didn't look confused, just normal. I didn't ask, because I didn't want to confirm what I already suspected. It doesn't need you to hear it clearly, it just needs you to respond. Even once, that's enough, because once you respond, you've already accepted it as something real. And after that, it doesn't have to try as hard. I've started noticing changes in the system itself, not readings, behavior. The flow is smoother now, less fluctuation, less noise, like the irregularities are being removed or absorbed. I stood in the intake corridor again tonight, first time in a while, didn't go close, just far enough to hear it. It wasn't layered anymore, no overlapping voices, no fragments, just one, steady, clear, not calling me, not calling anyone, just speaking. I couldn't make out the words, but I understood the tone. It wasn't trying anymore. It didn't need to. It had already learned enough. I stepped back, slowly, and for a second, it stopped. Not the sound, the effort, like it had noticed I wasn't responding and didn't need to adjust. That's when it hit me. It's not trying to reach us anymore. It's filtering us, figuring out who reacts, who listens, who answers, and who doesn't, because it doesn't need everyone, just enough. I don't answer. I don't acknowledge it. I don't let myself react. But I know that's not true for everyone. And every time someone does, even just once, it gets closer to sounding like something that doesn't need to be questioned at all. And when that happens, I don't think it'll be coming from the pipes anymore. It'll just sound like someone standing right behind you in a place you're used to hearing people saying something you've already decided is worth turning around for. I stopped wearing the radio. Not because of what came through it, because of what didn't. Silence used to mean something. Now it doesn't. Now silence just feels like space waiting to be filled, and I don't trust what fills it anymore. I kept working for a while. Same shifts, same routines, just quieter. No unnecessary movement. No talking unless I had to. It made things easier. Until it didn't. Because once you remove enough noise, you start hearing everything else. I was in the filtration wing when it changed again. Part of the plant is different. Less pressure, more controlled flow. You can hear individual systems working instead of one constant hum. I was checking a valve line, and I heard footsteps. Behind me, normal distance, normal pace. I didn't turn, I waited. The steps stopped when I stopped. I moved again. They followed. Not matching me, not copying. Just staying behind, at the same distance. I kept working, didn't acknowledge it, because if someone was actually there, they'd say something. Eventually, they didn't. I finished the check, stood up, and for a second, I almost turned around. just to confirm, just to clear it. I didn't. I walked out instead. The footsteps didn't follow me into the next room. That's what made it worse, because that means they weren't tied to me. They were tied to that space or something in it. I checked the logs later. No one else assigned to that section. No movement recorded. Nothing. I stopped going into that wing after that, took longer routes, shifted tasks. No one questioned it. That's another thing I've noticed. People don't question things as much anymore. Not the small ones. Not the things that would have stood out before. It's like there's less resistance now, less instinct to check something that feels slightly off, and that's exactly what it needs. I heard it again tonight. Not from a pipe, not from a wall, from the space between rooms. A voice. Clear. Calm. Hey. Simple. Nothing specific. But it hit the same part of my brain that expects a response. I didn't move. Didn't answer. It didn't repeat, didn't change, just stayed there, in that moment, like it was enough, like it didn't need anything else from me. I waited longer than I should have, because I wanted to see if it would push further. It didn't. That's when I realized, it's not trying to convince you anymore. It's waiting for the ones who don't need convincing, the ones who will respond without thinking, without questioning, because to them, it already sounds right. I don't think it's learning anymore. I think it's done, and now, it's just sorting. Figuring out who hears it as something that doesn't belong and who hears it as something completely normal. I still don't turn around, not when I hear it, not when I feel something behind me, because I know, the moment I do, I won't be checking if something's there. I'll be confirming that whatever's there already knows exactly what it needs to sound like to make that feel like the most natural thing I could have done.